It's all you, big dog.
All right. How you guys doing? My name is John. Um, Today I'm going to be talking about a little, about my drug addiction, but I will spend a little bit of time on each little thing, so you guys can get an idea of where I come from and how somebody like me even got started. And I say that because I grew up in a military family. I grew up in a very strict family. I'm talking 15 years old, and I'm still being told to be in the house before the street lights are on. And I lived on military bases for 14 years. We moved from state to state, quite, not too bad, but it was enough. We lived in California. I was born in Arizona. My mom and I moved to California. She met her then husband, had my little brother. They divorced, and then she met my then stepdad, who was in the army, and they had my little brother, and we living on the bases. I grew up differently than other people. With that being said, amongst kids, there wasn't racism wasn't abundant. It wasn't like that. Like, I grew up with friends, of all walks of life. You know what I mean? So I didn't grow up in environments like that. My mom was not ever a drug addict. She's never even smoked pot in her life. She might drink a couple glasses of wine a year, and that's it. And she's always been like that. She's never had problems like that. I never knew my real dad, so I don't really know what his background was like, because he was out of my life pretty much before I was even born. So she didn't even really know him that well. That's a whole nother story. But I didn't grow up doing smoking cigarettes, drinking. I was an athlete. I played sports in high school until my senior year. Even when my mom and my stepdad got a divorce and he got out of the army, we went from California, Arizona, California, Nebraska, Texas, and then back to Arizona. All from the time when I was about 7, I think we moved there it was lower than that. We moved a lot, and I mean, so we moved to Arizona in 2000. I'll say that. And I was there for 20 years. With that being said, I didn't have, like, my mom worked a lot, so she was a single mom for a lot of the time, so she was gone a lot. I did get in a lot of trouble growing up. I was grounded, and literally half of my childhood, and that's really no joke. Like, I went through, got in some big trouble on a military base when I was a kid, and I was grounded to my room for 3 months. So I was always doing, shit, but I just never did drugs or drinking. It wasn't my thing. I didn't start doing that. I didn't even get drunk for the first time until I was 18 in high school. It was my senior year, and I started drinking a lot. Like most kids, when they start drinking in high school, a lot of them continue to do it. Not everybody continues doing it to a certain extent. So I never really was into drinking, but I did it for a while. I smoked pot for my first time when I was 18. Immediately I started selling pot. I grew up really poor for a lot of the time, even though my stepdad was in the military. He was really bad with money. So I'll leave it at that. Even with my mom working 2 jobs and him working, in the army, we were literally still living paycheck to paycheck. And then plus, when my mom was a single mom, it was really bad. So when I found an opportunity to make money, I jumped on it and I stopped playing sports. I had decided to not go to the college I was planning on going to, which was my dream college, which I had gotten accepted into. It was Nebraska University, and for what I thought was a good reason, I stopped doing that because I made a few $100s in, a couple of days. And I worked, but then I progressed. we can even fast forward. I started, just like a lot of people do, it's that typical cliche thing. I started selling that, then I went to coke, and then, meth, and eventually it was heroin. And that's how my journey began. For a long time, I avoided doing any heroin or anything like that. I did coke and smoked weed, but um, that had already brought me up to a different level. Uh, they say you're a product of your environment. So when you step it up on certain aspects in the streets, you're also stepping up the dangers on both sides. That I say that to this day, that was the most stressful job I've ever had, was selling dope. I had to worry about people on the street robbing me or trying to get one over on me. Then I had to worry about the cops trying to get me, as jam you up as well. So on that aspect, it's super stressful. But a lot of the times, I didn't really start doing heroin until I started selling, a lot for it, which I eventually caught my first felony charges, which were, I had 7 felonies. In Arizona, a felony 2 is the same charge that you would get if you, for second-degree murder. I had 5 of those. So they caught me with meth, heroin, what they called a smorgasbord of pills. I got caught with a pound of spice. If anybody knows what that is, I had 9 pounds of spice. I'm sorry. Which they thought was weird because usually smoke shops have that kind of stuff. And then what else did I have? I had another one that I don't remember what it was. And then on top of it, I had a whole bunch. I think I had like 200 Suboxone strips. I had almost like 400 or 500 Subutex pills, and then I had all the guns. Those were the other 2 felony 4s. So in Arizona, if you get caught with heroin and guns in the same room and they're not divided, say one's in a bathroom and the other one's in a living room, if they're in the same room, they consider protecting your stash at all costs. Which sounds bad, but I didn't do anything. Well, I didn't shoot at the cops. All of my guns, I knew they were coming in. All of my guns were disassembled. If they were able to be disassembled, they were. All my bullets were out of all my guns. It's just that little weird technical thing they had. So they were able to give me a more harsh charge to add on to there. In Arizona, they'll give you usually double of everything, so that when they give you a plea bargain, they can break it down that way and still stick you with something. So and then I had a small, and then they also threw in a little small possession of paraphernalia for like a pipe and some straws or whatever it was. At that time, my drug habit had went from smoking pot and doing coke and selling coke to selling heroin, selling meth in large quantities all the time. And my drug habit was, at one point in time, was around 8 to 9 grams of heroin every day, and anywhere from 3 to probably 4 grams of meth a day. And the way I chose to do it was not your traditional way. You don't have to really go, you know what I mean? So I don't want to trigger anybody by saying stuff like that. So I'll try and avoid a little bit of things like that. But it was probably the worst way that you can consume those type of drugs. And they would usually be in this at the same time. And when you do that, it does something to your mental. You're not thinking about stuff. So I got in trouble. That's the habit that I went to jail with. Probably one of the worst things I ever experienced. I was used to selling what I was doing, so I never got sick. So I went, I don't know, 8 or 9 months without ever getting sick one time, sick off of heroin. So I experienced that for my real first time. And it was off of such amount. I remember sitting on the toilet in jail, peeing, pooping, and throwing up at the same time. Standing up, and I'm trying to not get it everywhere, but at the same time, not get it all over myself as well. None of that stopped me. As soon as I got out, I was on an ankle monitor, which you would think that that stopped me, but I found ways around that. I eventually, at one point in time, I wasn't allowed out of the house from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So my way around that is I had one way to unplug. I had one time I could unplug my my box without getting violated and getting arrested and back, going to jail. So I unplugged it one time, and in 30 seconds, probably I plugged in 500 to 600 feet of extension cord. So at any point in time, you could catch me in that apartment complex at 2 in the morning. And if you just follow the little orange and green cords, it would eventually lead into somebody's apartment where I was hanging out, and you could walk in there and I'm still doing drugs with an ankle monitor on, a pile of cord next to me on the couch or wherever I'm sitting, and a big old black box sitting next to me. So and none of that stopped any of it. I continued that kind of behavior in and out of jail. Uh, Before I finally went to prison, I had already been in jail. I think that was my 13th time being in jail, and every time I've went to jail was a minimum of, I think, 30 days. Most of the time it was 3 to 4 months. A couple of times I caught new charges, but they dropped them. But I still sat in jail for 4 months, and then they would give me another month for probation violation. So it'd be like a 5 month. And so that went on for about 18 months. Finally, the state pretty much had enough, and I caught a new charge, which is what I ultimately went to prison for. I was in and out of jail, usually for probation violations. Um, Eventually, I stopped selling drugs and just became the drug addict. Uh, just running around doing all kinds of crazy, horrible stuff. It's a lot of karma that you do have to pay for later on. Um, I've noticed the difference, but I've also noticed that once I went to prison, I changed. I didn't do any drugs in prison, so I didn't use Suboxone. I didn't use Subutex. I used the good old cold turkey, and I decided in there that if I couldn't stay sober in there, how could I stay sober on the streets? Because people don't realize, but in Arizona, statistically, there's more dope in the prisons than there are on the streets. So if you can imagine that, anybody can get it. It's not hard. They'll let you run up a $5,000 debt before they decide they're going to just get rid of you. If they can't extort you to get your parents or your family to pay for it, then they'll just get rid of you. You know what I mean? So I decided if I couldn't stay sober in there, that I couldn't do it on the streets. And I did, I stayed sober the entire time. I didn't even smoke cigarettes. And even now, I'm currently still a cigarette smoker, but in prison, I just didn't. Um, Ultimately, that was what got me sober. I stayed sober for 4 years. A little over 14 months ago, I fell off the wagon and, lost my way for about 3 to 4 months. And my aunt, she actually has been to prison for quite some time. She got out. She's been sober 12 years, and that's her job. She works with people in recovery. She goes directly into the streets for the place she works, and she helps people and tries to get them sober, get them in halfway houses or recovery homes, whatever. Um, my lady she's my lady now, but we did break up in that time because she had never dealt with and she had never dealt with that kind of erratic behavior. Because when I relapse, I don't just do a little bit. I have addiction problems. So I don't know when to stop, period. Um, I've overdosed 8 times. That didn't stop me. 8 times total. The last time I told my mom and my lady, I don't think I have any more overdoses in me. I literally could feel it because I overdosed twice in that 4 months. And I felt different those 2 times than I did the other times. And the other times were way worse overdoses where had my heart wasn't even pumping for 43 seconds at the longest, at one of the times. That was what the EMT had told me. So with that being said, none of that ever stopped me. And then when I relapsed, this time I got help. I finished probation. I made sure that when I got out of prison, I finished probation. It was almost like if I'm being honest with myself and everybody else, it was almost as if I was waiting for the first time to be off probation in 8 years and not have to worry about anything. And then not only that, but the biggest lesson I learned is the same lesson that you learn in every meeting you ever go to. I guarantee you there's always going to be at least one person that's always going to either, if they don't, if the speakers or whoever's running the meeting doesn't say it, somebody is going to say, stay away from people who do drugs, period. If you don't do heroin, but you were a meth addict, you still can't go hang out with people that do heroin. And you know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. I know a couple people maybe that it has worked for, and good for them, but for most people like me, it doesn't work. And that was where I messed up because I was clean for almost 5 years, and I had 4 months until my 5 year, and then I started hanging out with a guy that I worked with, and he did meth, and that's how I slowly slipped back into it. I did good all that time because I didn't hang out with people that did that. When I started hanging out with him, within 2 weeks, I was doing it again, and I kept it under control. At least I thought, for 8 months. Like I would just do like a little tiny bit, and I wouldn't touch it for a few months, and then it was just like full force. I'm literally doing. I'm back to, consuming meth the same way because I didn't want to get back on heroin. So I started doing meth, again a lot, and then eventually it led into that. And within 2 weeks, I only relapsed back on heroin for 2 weeks, and I already had overdosed twice. All that new stuff going around, it's not the same anymore. Um, it took a lot away from the whole thing. I've been fortunate enough that I didn't land in a life sentence. I had 3 years. I did my time, got out. I have a career. I'm a journeyman saw cutter. I spent it took me 4 years. I would say about 3 to 4 years to be able to say that I'm a real cement saw cutter. I can go when I go apply somewhere. I make a bare minimum of $24 an hour now. Before this, I had never had a job in my entire life that paid me more than $10 an hour ever, because I always would take bullshit ass jobs, fast food. Not that restaurants are bullshit jobs, because a lot of the economy is based on restaurants. So, but I mean, like, something that I can actually start a career on. You know what I mean? There's certain things that you don't want to do the rest of your life. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you plan on retiring, there's certain things it makes it harder, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. But with that being said, it's, you know what I mean? I had to change everything. This time around, I've been sober 14 months again, so I went to 4 and almost 5, and then, a few months, and then now I'm back, and it's been 14 months. And every single time I get sober like that, my life changes dramatically for the better, all the time. Because I'm not being weird. People that don't do drugs, when they see people that do, even when most people that even try and hide it, you can't really hide stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, you do weird movements, or you just can't sit still, or you know what I mean? You look like you smoked, a pound of bud before you came to a job interview. You know what I mean? Because you're doing heroin or whatever. So it's just never for me. I have to stay completely away from it, 100%. And if I have to give advice to anybody, that's the advice that I give some people is you have to get yourself away from people that do that, period. And why test it to see if you're strong enough? I was just a dumbass and knew I wasn't strong enough. I just would let myself slip into it every time. Uh, so that's the most advice. And also is, it sounds cliche, but making amends is probably one of the best things for me. I do a lot of charities. type things, you know what I mean? My own personal things. I don't go to like an organized charity and do stuff. I do stuff on my own just because I know that I have so much bad karma that I have to give up, that I have to get back. I don't go when I give back to somebody, whether they're homeless, if I know that they're on drugs, I see them out on a corner. Um, when I help people like that, which I do a lot, I don't do that in front of people. Like some people like, there's people on like TikTok and stuff. They like to record stuff. And for me, that's not the gratifying moment of that, because you're doing it in front of people. I think the best times to do it is when nobody's looking and you're not telling anybody. Like the only person that ever knows I do stuff like that really is now when what I said to you guys and my lady. I don't tell my mom, I don't tell my brothers that I do stuff like that. Just it doesn't for me that's not how that's not the best way to give back. You don't do it for an audience. You got to do it actually for yourself to make that actually sink in and actually help heal yourself. You know what I mean? You can't do that stuff for attention, in my opinion. Not that it's bad to do charities. Me personally, I just do it that way myself. So now, my I have my daughter back in my life. My lady and I have our own house. You know, I work. Uh, I have my own YouTube channel now, where I talk about my story, and it goes into more detail. And I talk about my prison experience a lot. It's a prison channel mostly, but it's really about my life as well. And I make sure I let that be known that it's about my life and my experience, and everything like that. Um, that's another way I try and give back as well. I try and give people an insight as to what it's like on the other side, and most people don't realize what you have to go through in prison. So I give that experience in a way, and I, do interviews with people that have been to other prisons. And if you can stop that and stop it, even one or two people from going back to prison because they see how horrible it is, or I mean, not going back, but going to for the first time, or, stop somebody, get somebody help. You know what I mean? I offer that on my channel as well. That's just my way of being able to give back now. So yeah, that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. Try to keep it, at a good time frame. So if there's other stuff, you guys can always check out my channel at AZ Ruction, and I also have my Instagram, which is savage underscore affiliated. I talk to everybody. People leave comments in my videos. I am always on there and I always get my comments. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed my story, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity for me coming on here and giving my story. So yeah, that's it.